Welcome to the Energy Conversations podcast, your go-to source for unpacking the complexities of the South African energy sector. My name is Thokozile Zambane. I will be your guide, and every 2 weeks, we will be on a journey of bridging the knowledge gap surrounding South Africa's energy sector and the transition to a low-carbon economy. Welcome back to the Energy Conversations podcast, where we break down the complexities of the South African energy sector into digestible insights. I am your host, Thokozile Zambane, and in today's episode titled Understanding Clean Energy Sources and Opportunities, we aim to unpack the role of zero-emission clean energy sources in the just energy transition, as well as the value chain opportunities that are presented. I'm excited to have 3 seasoned energy experts joining us for this conversation. Firstly, we've got Dr. Rethabile Melamu, who is the CEO of the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association, Niveshen Govender, who is the CEO of the South African Wind Energy Association, as well as Princess Mthombeni, a nuclear energy advocate. In this episode, we will be answering your questions around clean energy sources in order to make the sector more accessible and understandable for ordinary South Africans. Let's begin with some introductions. Perhaps our guests could just share briefly about their roles in the energy sector. I'm going to ask Princess if we could start with you.
Thank you, everyone, and greetings to everyone who's tuned in, and to you, Thokozile, and the panelists. My name is Princess Mthombeni from here in South Africa. I am a nuclear communication specialist. I have worked in the nuclear industry for 14 years. To be factual, I've worked for the industry for over 14 years and have traveled to the world learning more about the industry and what happens in different countries across the globe. And I am a founder of Africa for Nuclear, which is an advocacy campaign that aims to promote nuclear as a contributor to achieving Africa's agenda for sustainable development.
Thank you very much for that, Princess. Dr. Rethabile, could you share briefly about what your role is in the energy sector?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rethabile Melamu, and first of all, thank you very much, Thokozile, for inviting me and the company that I represent, the South African Solar Photovoltaic Industry Association. I am the CEO of the association. It's known as SAPVIA for short. We are the voice of solar PV in South Africa. We represent about 800 companies that operate across the entire solar PV value chain, ranging from developers all the way to small installation companies. Our role at SAPVIA is to advocate and lobby for conducive regulatory and business environment for our members. Our role is also to ensure that we provide networking opportunities for members so that they can grow businesses and thrive. But we very mindful of the socioeconomic conditions of our country. And we do believe that as an emergent sector, we have a responsibility and a role to contribute to the socioeconomic development of South Africa by primarily contributing to energy security, but of course, all the other socioeconomic imperatives.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rethabile. Niveshen, over to you. What has your role been in the energy sector?
Thank you, Thokozile. My name is Niveshen Govender. I'm the CEO of the South African Wind Energy Association. The association itself is a non-for-profit industry association, really representing the united voice of the wind industry here in South Africa. And our main aim is to advocate for the advancement of wind energy as part of the energy mix in South Africa.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Niveshen. Let's get straight into the episode and dig into some of the questions that we've received. Princess, I'd like to start with you in positioning nuclear energy, given that when most South Africans think about clean energy, the immediate thought is wind, solar, hydro, and nuclear isn't necessarily considered. Why is nuclear energy or nuclear considered a clean energy source?
Well, Togo, first maybe describe what do we mean by clean energy sources. We mean those energy sources that do not produce greenhouse gases. We are also looking into energy sources such as wind, solar, geothermal, bioenergy. Some have even included gas as part of clean energy, but that's debatable. In terms of nuclear is really a clean energy source in such that it also does not produce CO. Nuclear power plants, they do not produce CO2 during their operation. Now, a study by the United Economic Commission for Europe, which was done in 2022, comparing carbon emissions of all electricity generation sources, nuclear had the lowest, even lower than renewables. So it is in that context that nuclear is part and parcel of the clean energy sources.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that explanation, Princess. Dr. Rethabile, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and just around solar power. How much does solar power currently contribute to South Africa's energy mix?
So in terms of solar PV's contribution to South Africa's power mix, we contribute approximately 5%, and that comprises about 2.4 gigawatts of utility scale solar PV projects that have been procured through the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Procurement Program, or RIP for short. But in the past couple of years, we have seen a very rapid growth of the deployment of solar PV, and we do estimate that the entire industry or installed capacity is anything between 7 and 8 gigawatts. The 4 to 5 gigawatts installed capacity comprises both residential, commercial, and industrial sector installation. And there will be a couple of private sector-led utility projects coming online from 2024 into 2025 and beyond. So we are about 8 gigawatt installed capacity or industry, and we're estimating that we'll see about 3 to 4 gigawatt installed every year up to 2030 across all market segments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rethabile. I think you've given us a really great broad overview in terms of what solar currently provides in South Africa's energy mix. And I think what you've also really highlighted in your response is the future of solar's contribution to South Africa's energy mix. And what we can understand from this is that we are likely and in the future to see a larger contribution of solar in South Africa's energy mix, and that presents then a number of opportunities. Niveshen, I wanted to bring you in here from a wind perspective. How much does wind power currently contribute to South Africa's energy mix? What's your view in terms of the proposed contribution of wind power in future?
Thanks, Thokozile. I'm going to answer this in two parts. So on the first one, in terms of the current role of wind energy in South Africa, contribution of wind power can be quantified in a number of ways. The easiest way to do this is the installed capacity. So how much of wind power has been built. So since 2011, through the Renewable Energy IPP procurement program, there has been just over 3.4 gigawatts of wind energy installed. And this accounts for roughly 6% of the total energy mix of the country. One could then ask me, Thokozile, what does this mean for the common South African? To this end, we quantify the amount of energy generated over an amount of time. So the wind fleet of the 3.4 gigawatts produces about 38 gigawatt hours of electricity per year. And then lastly, we look at the impact of this to quantify the wind energy contribution of powering 3.6 million average households in the country annually. What is important to understand here, Thokozile, is that when this power is generated, the wind energy generation profile very much supports the country's demand profile, meaning that wind energy is generated when it is most needed. As an example, during the evening peaks, when most electricity demand is seen in the country, wind energy contributes an average of about 2,000 megawatts of power to the system. This having an impact or a major impact on reducing the amount of load shedding we're seeing by at least 2 stages every day during evening peak. I'm going to answer your second question in terms of the potential role of wind energy as part of the future energy mix. So look, based on the technical characteristics and the countless benefits that we see from wind energy, as I've started to outline, wind energy has a significant role to play, as part of the future energy mix. So it really depends who you ask as to how much of energy is going to come online. To answer the question today, let's focus on the policy directive. While we have several policies in the country that guide, unpacking the wind energy contribution over a period of time up until 2030 or up until 2050, the most relevant for us is the IRP 2019, which is currently being implemented and provides that future energy mix indication of additionally 14.4 gigawatts of new wind energy capacity that needs to be brought on by 2030. The IRP 2019 is clear in the transition to low carbon to a low carbon energy mix, estimating that by 2030, our clean energy contribution will increase from the current 11% of wind and solar PV to 41% of clean energy. And then if we look at that 41% composition of clean energy, 57% of that is set to come from wind energy. So in my mind, this is an achievable plan, that will reach us in a stage of affordable, sustainable, and energy secure system that we really want to see.
Thank you very much for that, Niveshen. And you raised a really important point in terms of bringing in the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, which really sets out what South Africa's energy generation mix would be in order to meet the current and future demand. Dr. Rethabile, could I then just bring you back into the conversation in terms of looking at solar power and the IRP? What then is the anticipated contribution into the energy mix that we would see for solar?
Thank you very much, Thokozile. An important document that the IRP is, because it really sets a goal for where the country is going in terms of generation capacity of the various technologies. So that's a really good question. We do believe that IRP does acknowledge contribution of solar PV, but it does underestimate its contribution in our view. And we base that on our empirical evidence that from 2022, we have seen more than 1 gigawatt of installations per year. In 2023, over 300 gigawatt of embedded generation has been installed, and we see that continuing up to 2030. So whilst we welcome the IRP, both the 2019 version and the draft 2023, we do believe that there has to be a reconsideration of the contribution of solar PV, and this is based on empirical evidence that we have as the association and really shared by other actors within the industry, such as Eskom. You would know that Eskom publishes installed capacity from various technologies on a weekly basis, and they're estimating that solar PV's contribution is about 5 gigawatts. And that's just the private sector. You add that to about 2.4 gigawatts of utility projects or utility REAP project, that contributes about 7 gigawatts. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Princess, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation and in talking around nuclear and how much nuclear currently contributes to South Africa's electricity generation, and also in continuing with our conversation around the IRP and the anticipated contribution of clean energy such as wind and solar. What are the prospects, or what is proposed in terms of nuclear? What are the prospects of nuclear energy in South Africa's clean energy landscape?
Thank you, Togo. I think for your first question, I have the most simplest answer. Nuclear contributes around 5% of South Africa's total electricity. We have one nuclear power plant based in Cape Town. It's called Koeberg Nuclear Power Plant, which powers half of Western Cape community. So that's in terms of nuclear energy capacity in South Africa. But with regards to the IRP and the prospects for nuclear energy in South Africa, if you look at the IRP 2019, it recognized the need for additional 2,500 nuclear generation. And decision 8 of that IRP, it called for the procurement of new nuclear 2,500 megawatt capacity. But if you look at the current draft IRP 2023, it contemplates 4 possible scenarios for the procurement of energy in the period of 2031 until 2050. And one of these pathways proposes the implementation of a new nuclear build program for a total of 14,500 megawatt at a pace and scale that the country can afford. I need to mention that, with 2,500 megawatt expected to come online in the period between 2031 and 2035.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Princess. I think a key consideration, or what a lot of South Africans are concerned about or would want to understand, is that in this transition to a low carbon economy, what are the opportunities that are then presented by the adoption of clean energy sources? Dr. Rethabile, can I start with you in terms of setting out what are some of the opportunities that are presented by solar power in South Africa?
Thanks, Toko. Let me preface my response by indicating that South Africa will be the 10th biggest solar PV market globally, according to Bloomberg NEF. And if we have such a big industry, both in South Africa and globally, it is imperative that the residents of this country, the communities and the society benefits from this blooming industry. So the biggest contributor of solar PV is, of course, to energy security. And let me really give you an anecdote to just drive the point home. Last weekend, I attended a funeral in Sebokeng, a family funeral, and in a township called Boiketlong. It's an established informal settlement. People have been living there for well over 10 years. I did not know that in this province of Gauteng, there were communities that have been in existence for over 10 years that are not electrified. And that's the case in Boiketlong. And this is in Gauteng, the economic hub of the country. You can just imagine what the situation is in other provinces. But what was pleasantly surprising is that most of those communities had embraced solar PV, unbeknown to SAPVIA, at least to some of the SAPVIA Secretariat members, including myself. And I visited my cousin, and I found that he had a solar PV module, he had an inverter, and he had a battery. And in that community that's not electrified, solar PV is providing energy solution for those households. So essentially, this industry, this technology has the ability to provide electricity and energy to underserved communities. That's really what one of the key and the main benefits are. But through one of our initiatives, which is the Solar PV Green Card Initiative, which is a skills development initiative, we have contributed to skilling hundreds, if not thousands, of young people that operate in the installation, especially residential installation market. And I should give credit here to Mr. Niveshen, the CEO, because he's the one who spearheaded that program before I joined SAPVIA. And we have seen that initiative contributing a great deal to skills development and job creation amongst the young people, even in marginalized communities. So really we see solar PV as a key contributor, not just to skills development, but also to job creation. So another opportunity is the creation of jobs, especially manufacturing jobs across the entire solar PV value chain, from the manufacturing or the assembly of panels to the manufacturing of tracker systems to cables that are inputs into the solar PV system. And to that end, we've been working very closely with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, our sister organizations, SAWIA, and the various other stakeholders to really think hard about how to create a very robust manufacturing industry in the renewable energy space. Still early days, but we do believe that there is an opportunity to create additional jobs to however many jobs are being created already by the solar PV sector. And lastly, the one point that I want to bring across is the fact that solar PV contributes quite significantly to the decarbonization agenda of South Africa, in particular contributing to the NDCs, the nationally determined contribution, as a signatory to the Paris Agreement. So there are plenty of benefits that this industry provides the South African economy beyond just being a contributor to energy security. Thanks, Togo.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Rethabile. Niveshen, could you maybe just come into the conversation and position what the opportunities are for wind power or in the wind industry?
Yes, thanks, Thokozile. The development of the wind energy sector in South Africa presents various opportunities for South Africans across the value chain. And all of this despite the challenges that we're facing in market conditions. So I will speak to a number of these opportunities, if you just bear with me. Firstly, let's talk job creation. The construction, operation, and maintenance of wind farms create employment opportunities, not just through the country, but also specifically for local communities. These jobs can range from construction workers and engineers to technicians and administrative staff that are required on these wind farms. These direct jobs amount to more than 30,000 full-time jobs per year. With these jobs come skills development and skills transfer. So some of these skills include engineering, project management, technical maintenance, environmental monitoring. This really provides an opportunity for new skills, upskilling and reskilling, making graduates as well as the existing labor market more competitive in the evolving job market that we're seeing. We have not even started to quantify the support services, which then include catering services, security, transportation, accommodation, all required in and around these wind farms that we're seeing being built. And all of these services, there's an opportunity for local businesses, for small businesses to supply and really contributing to and impacting local economic development. Small and medium enterprises also have a space to participate in various aspects of the wind energy value chain, such as construction upfront, whether it's transportation and logistics of components, maintenance services later on, or consulting throughout the lifespan of the project. The wind industry, through the public procurement program, supports the participation of SMEs in the sector, really fostering this entrepreneurship space and economic development space within the industry. Dr. Melamu has talked about local manufacturing and supply chains. This is another opportunity that we see for local manufacturers and supply of components and equipment for wind turbines in the country. The wind industry, we currently boast 47% local content on average across our wind fleet. 95% of the balance of plant components are already locally manufactured. So the opportunity is as wide as we want to make it. Another key contributor or an opportunity that we saw coming out of the program is community ownership and investment. All wind energy projects offer the opportunity for local communities to invest in their own stake of the project, meaning ownership of the project. This is built into the public procurement program to ensure this kind of benefit and opportunity. And lastly, there are opportunities within research and development with areas spanning across wind resource assessment, the turbine technology itself, grid integration, environmental impact mitigation. These are all areas of expertise in relevant fields where South Africans can contribute to the R&D effects, really driving innovation and competitiveness.
Thank you very much for that, Niveshen. I think what's quite exciting is the fact that, your clean energy industries like solar and wind are actually contributing to ancillary industries that are currently struggling in the South African economy. So it's quite exciting to see initiatives that would then spearhead or drive activity in the manufacturing sector as well, and really position South Africa's manufacturing industry to also be able to benefit from this transition. Princess, just to come back to you and bring you in explaining and expanding on what are some of the opportunities that are presented in the adoption of nuclear energy.
All right, Togo, nuclear energy currently offers 30% of low carbon electricity in the world. And if you look at the opportunities that we get from nuclear energy, is first and foremost is energy security, because we need to also look into things of ensuring that this country has, reliable supply of electricity, so that we are able to attract investors. Because no one will invest in a country where there's load shedding, as we are experiencing currently. And also, nuclear offers the affordable, clean, and reliable electricity in terms of Uber, which Eskom has published on their financials, that nuclear is currently the cheapest source of electricity in this country. But also, we cannot run away from the issues of jobs, as it has been mentioned by the panelists. We have graduates, young people in this country who are qualified but are without jobs. So there's high unemployment rate in this country. A nuclear project, because it's a mega project, would be able to address that. But also importantly, we are looking into coal power plants that need to be decommissioned in South Africa. And in decommissioning those coal power plants, they need to be replaced with another reliable source of energy, because coal currently gives us the reliable electricity in this country. So if South Africa is looking into expanding nuclear, they can also maybe look into issues or into technologies such as small modular reactors when they become commercially viable, so that they replace those coal power plants that are due for decommissioning when they get decommissioned eventually. So I think that that's what we get from nuclear opportunities, or those are the opportunities that we get from the nuclear industry.
Thank you very much for that, Princess. I think, all three of our guests have really expanded on what the opportunities are in clean energy. I think what is worth considering, or what's always important to consider, is that with any opportunities, there are some challenges. And I'd like us to just have a discussion around the challenges that are faced by the clean energy sector. And Dr. Rethabile, I'd like to bring you into the conversation in just spelling out what are some of the key challenges that have been experienced in the adoption of solar power in South Africa.
So when you come to the utility scale, one of the biggest constraints in the South African market is lack of grid capacity, especially in the resource-rich areas. If you consider Eskom GCCA 2025, you'll pick up that there is no capacity to connect renewable energy projects in the Northern Cape and other provinces, except that with the new curtailment rules that have been published, things have changed slightly. You know that we still need about 14,000 kilometers of transmission network that has to be developed to incorporate the capacity that we need to be energy secure as a country. When you consider the commercial and industrial market, there are plenty of distribution and network challenges that have not even been tackled. Some of our projects at CNI need to interface with municipalities. You'll find that there is no capacity in some municipalities to process some of the applications, that leads to delays in implementation of some of the projects. And when it comes to a residential market or small system market, skills development is the biggest concern. Safety is one of the concerns, and that's why there are programs like PV Green Card are critical for ensuring both quality and safety for the sector. So in a nutshell, those are the three challenges that I can outline, but there are plenty more. But you can't really frame challenges into necessarily one box. They will be different and unique depending on the market segment that you deal with.
Thank you very much. And Niveshen, from a wind industry perspective, what are some of the key challenges that you have come across?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. As with the other industries, the wind industry continues to face several challenges. What we may consider as a positive indication, however, on the maturity of the industry is that the challenges are changing. So we're not facing the same challenges that we faced 50 years ago. As we stand today, there are probably three key challenges that we prioritize as an association and are addressing actively. The first one, which is the most important or key one for us, is market uncertainty. Here, we mainly focus on how we look at local market conditions for investment decisions. We encourage here clear, consistent, and stable policies, which are essential to provide a conducive environment for investment and growth in the sector. And added to this, the consistency and continuous implementation of those policies are required to ensure certainty. Our biggest and most pressing challenge remains grid capacity, as Dr. Melamu has alluded to, for the integration of new wind farms. We continue to explore options that resolve this challenge in both the short-term and the long-term horizons. The curtailment framework that we saw come out earlier this year provides immediate relief, while discussions around the smooth long-term integration requires investment in grid infrastructure, energy storage solutions, and advanced grid management technologies to ensure we're addressing it in a long term. Other challenges in the project development space include securing land for wind farm development and obtaining the necessary permits and approvals on that land, which can be time-consuming and complex. So land use conflicts, environmental concerns, competing interests for land can delay project development and increase the cost of developing these renewable energy projects. And then lastly, in terms of market certainty, we look at the market dynamics on pricing particularly. Fluctuation of the electricity prices, competition from other energy technologies or sources, and market dynamics such as uncertain pricing mechanisms, market rules, tariff infrastructure, or tariff structures, all influence the economic viability of the wind projects. Let me move into challenges around implementation. Implementation challenges with evolving technology, innovation, and timing of the new projects being built. We are envisioning congestion over the next 2 to 3 years to deal with the logistics of building new wind farms. With an estimated 2 gigawatts of new wind projects expected to be built in the short term, that's anywhere between 2 and 4 years, we need to consider port planning and capacity of our ports, road transportation of these components and equipment to get to site, special purpose vehicles to transport this equipment, police escorts and the capacity of our police services, and various other aspects that need serious intervention to ensure that smooth implementation of the new energy infrastructure projects that need to be built in the short term. And then lastly, a challenge we need to consider is the social challenges, mainly driven by the market uncertainty, leaving a void in the skilled workforce. We also see a huge opportunity in skilling, reskilling, and upskilling to develop the next generation of workforce for renewable energy. We also consider community engagement and social acceptance as crucial challenges for the success of wind project development. And we really support, from an association point of view, effective communication, community consultation, and benefit sharing mechanisms as best practice to move the industry. So addressing the challenge really requires all of us, including government, industry stakeholders, communities, and investors, to develop effective policies, improve the infrastructure, enhance local capacity, and foster a supportive environment for sustainable growth of the South African energy market and the wind industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Niveshen. Princess, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation in terms of what have been some of the challenges that are being experienced by nuclear energy. If you can maybe just chat around those.
Since 3 is the number, let me also mention 3 challenges. The first one being a decisive government. Really, I think because nuclear government is highly involved in the implementation of nuclear projects. So we really lack that decisiveness from our government. But also the second one, really, in South Africa, unlike in other countries, there is no roadmap for nuclear. We have seen the Just Energy Transition being published, which excludes nuclear. So there's not really a roadmap for nuclear. If you look at the United States, they have publicly said they want to add 200,000 megawatts of nuclear energy capacity to their grid by 2050. In South Africa, there is not really much of that happening, except for the IRP, of course, which we have discussed. And it's not even really a showcase because it remains just a policy, but it needs to be implemented and it needs a separate strategy like Just Energy Transition. But the third one really, which is a big challenge in the nuclear industry, is the perceived prohibitive costs. As you know, that many people say nuclear is expensive, hence it cannot be implemented in South Africa because we cannot afford it, which really for me, it remains debatable. But since we are not really comparing here, I would rather just keep it at that to say it remains a challenge, but it's not really a challenge because we are able to solve it if we can really sit down and look into how we can make sure that nuclear is implemented.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Dr. Rethabile, I'd like to just bring you back into the conversation, and especially given the high uptake that we're seeing by ordinary South African consumers of solar power. Are you able to expand a bit or just talk about how do ordinary South Africans protect themselves when it comes to ensuring that these installations are done by appropriately qualified or experienced installers? Maybe you could just speak about some of the initiatives that SAPVIA has around that and what ordinary consumers can be looking out for as a way of ensuring that they are dealing with credible suppliers.
Thank you very much, Toko. That's a very important question and something that consumers need to be mindful of. It's a new industry and it comes with a lot of people that are taking opportunity. And really, you'll find a lot of fly-by-nights in the sector. So that's why SAPVIA, about 8 years ago, even way before the solar PV boom, initiated solar PV Green Card initiative. Broadly, it focuses on skills development. It focuses on compliance with the regulations and safety, and it also focuses on small business development. Listeners are welcome to visit the PV Green Card website to get more information there. But what's important for end users or consumers to be mindful of is that if somebody claims to be a PV Green Card affiliated company, and underscore it has to be a company, not an individual, they need to issue a consumer with a certificate of compliance, COC, that is in compliance with the Occupation Health and Regulation Act. In addition to that, they need to issue a report called an as-built report. Essentially, it captures the performance of the system and it lists the components that have been installed, and it is benchmarked against the best, the global best practices. So that is of critical importance, and I would really urge end users and consumers to really be mindful of fly-by-nights and not to be duped, and to visit our website. We have 500 companies that are listed there, but they are by no means the representatives or representation of industry, as there are thousands of installation companies and individuals out there. So I really do hope that consumers take heed. If not, they get into a serious risk of houses burning, as we would have seen. So really, I would urge end users to be mindful of.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Melamu. And I think you raise a really important point in that consumers do really need to be able to verify the necessary expertise and skills of the installers that they're allowed to do installations on their homes. We understand that with South Africa's current energy crisis, there is a need to install private installations in the form of solar and what we're seeing with a lot of homes. But what is important is to ensure that these installations are done in a safe manner and don't cause any damage in the future. So it's really important that consumers are then prudent from that perspective and take the necessary precautions. Niveshen, I want to just bring you back into the conversation here in that Dr. Melamu raised a bit earlier the Paris Agreement and South Africa's commitments thereunder. I wanted to just get your views or hear from you in terms of international partnerships and investments that are contributing to South Africa's energy transition. Could you expand a bit more on, in what ways are these international partnerships and investments contributing to South Africa's energy transition?
Thank you for the question, Topo. I believe international partnerships and investments are required across the globe, not just for the energy transition, but holistically to ensure we promote a healthy, prosperous, and sustainable economy. What we learned from the energy transition is that international investors and financial institutions have a role to play in funding renewable energy projects here in South Africa. Despite only accounting for 20% of the renewable energy investment pool, foreign direct investment is still required for renewable energy companies to contribute capital towards project development, construction, and operation of wind farms. The investments really drive economic growth, job creation, and infrastructure developments that we need in the country. Additionally, I think, international partnerships also bring access to advanced technologies, expertise, experience, and best practice that is happening across the globe. We find that collaboration with countries and organizations that have this kind of experience, whether it be within wind, solar, or other renewable energy technologies, helps South Africa accelerate its energy transition and overcome certain challenges that we may not have been able to overcome. I think with the growth and development of the sector, this expertise could be amplified locally, really offering the same value proposition to other countries, following the same path and the same transition that South Africa is following, and really positioning South Africa and South African companies as knowledge experts and potential investors elsewhere.
Thank you very much for that, Niveshen. And that really brings us to the end of this installment of the Energy Conversations podcast. I want to extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed guests for sharing their invaluable insights and expertise. Today, we continued the journey demystify South Africa's energy landscape and empower ordinary South African citizens. Join us next time as we continue our exploration. Until then, remember that the power to change our energy future lies within each of us. Thank you for tuning in, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for joining us on the Energy Conversations podcast, powered by Bayaka Infrastructure Partners, an authorized financial services provider, and the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School. Together, we are committed to empowering communities and fostering meaningful dialogue around the South African energy sector. Remember to subscribe and let's shape South Africa's energy future together.